you for the introduction, and thanks a lot to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk here. Good morning, everyone. Do you see my screen, or do I need to share it now?
Please share it now.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. So I need to. Sorry. I can't remove the screens with the camera, which is a bit annoying. Let me see.
We don't see that, so if it's
I'm afraid it will maybe well, I will see. I try to do like this. Okay, this work is was initiated when I was still in Toulouse, and it is a joint work with Olivier Mazet from the MAT Institute in Toulouse, and with Lounès Chiki from the EDB Lab in Toulouse and the Instituto Gulbenkian in Portugal. This is also ongoing work, so all feedbacks and comments are very welcome. I will start by introducing the context of this research, which is about linked selection and demographic inference. Then I will introduce the concept of inverse instantaneous coalescent rate, or IICR, and present some results we obtained with this approach until now. Then I will go to the focus of the talk today about the influence of linked selection on the IICR, and I will finish with a few conclusions and perspectives. Okay, so as probably all of you know, genetic diversity of populations and species is shaped by different evolutionary forces, including genetic drift, population demography and structure, but also linked selection. So this concept of linked selection was first defined by Ellen Robertson, and it reflects the fact that due to genetic linkage, selection operating at one locus indirectly has an effect also at neighboring loci. One classical example is the selective sweep scenario, where one positively selected mutation appear here in red. Due to this advantage, it will increase in frequency in the population, and so will also do the neutral mutations initially associated to this advantageous mutation. Occasionally, there will be recombination leading to new allelic combinations, and at the end, the selected allele will fix, and the genetic diversity in the region is generally lower than before the sweep. So this is only one form of linked selection. Other important forms are background selection, which on the opposite leads to eliminate from the population new variants with deleterious effects, and also balancing selection, which tends to maintain polymorphism at a longer time scale than what would be expected under genetic drift only. The respective role of these forces in shaping genetic diversity was already controversial between Wright and Fisher 1 century ago, and it is still the case nowadays. For instance, we have two recent opinion papers from Kern and Hahn on one hand, and Jensen and colleagues on the other, who express quite divergent views on this. And as a matter of fact, all the evolutionary forces have complex interaction, and the signatures can be quite confusing. For instance, it is well known that bottlenecks leave similar signatures as selective sweeps. This is one example among many others. That said, we have the chance today to have access to lots of genome-wide data in many organisms, and these data have already provided some insight into this question. One first is that linked selection is actually pervasive. So, and when I say linked selection, it's either background or selective sweep. This was demonstrated in at least two species, Drosophila melanogaster and humans. And in particular, one of the greatest evidence for this role of linked selection is the fact that genetic diversity generally correlates very well with local recombination rate or gene density, which reflects the fact that linked selection is of higher intensity when we have low recombination or when we have a lot of sites potentially under selective constraint. And the second point is that several simulation-based studies, and some also based on real data, pointed out that link selection can generally bias demographic inference if we don't account for it. So given these facts, it's really important to account for link selection when doing demographic inference. Two possible approaches can be set. The first one is to directly jointly estimate selection and demography. This was done, for instance, by two studies using simulation-based approaches, one with deep learning and the other with ABC. Because such scenarios with both selection and demography can quickly become very complex, these studies focused on relatively simple parameterization of selection and demography with not too many parameters. Another way would be to consider that because linked selection generally reduces genetic diversity, it can be modeled by a reduction of effective population size. And so, for instance, Rouge and colleagues recently developed in the inference demographic software DADDY, one approach where we can have two different classes of any along the genome, one for neutral sites and one for selected sites. And the proportion of these two classes and the ratio of the any in the two classes are estimated together with other demographic parameters. And indeed, this hypothesis that linked selection can be modeled as first approximation by a change of any is very classical and also dates back to the work of Ellen Robertson. So if we follow this, we will say that background selection and sweeps decrease effective population size and balancing selection increase population size. And elaborating on this observation, several authors pointed out that at the genome-wide level, the main effect of linked selection is likely to introduce some heterogeneity in effective population size, reflecting the fact that local recombination rates and functional constraints are themselves heterogeneous along the genome. And indeed, if we plot, if we estimate effective population size for different sliding windows over the genome, we find some heterogeneity, as shown by this picture here from the study by Jimenez Mena and colleagues. So here we will do this assumption and consider that linked selection can be approximated by modeling several classes of effective population size along the genome. Using this modeling approach, we will study the genome-wide distribution of the coalescence times T2 between two sequences. And this will allow us to draw conclusions concerning the influence of linked selection on demographic inference approaches that are based on this quantity, and in particular, the popular approach PSMC. Okay, so our works on the ICR actually started with the publication of this PSMC approach in 2011. What this method does is that it estimates the past variation of effective population size through time using a single diploid genome from the population. What you can see here on the graph are the estimations obtained for different human sequences. On the y-axis, we have the effective population size. On the x-axis, we have the time with present on the left and past on the right. And each colored curve corresponds to a different human sequences. As you can see in the ancient past, all curves provide the same estimation. And in the recent past, we have two groups, one for Eurasian sequences and one for African sequences. So I will not go into the details of this method, but the key idea to keep in mind is that by observing the variability of heterozygosity between the two haploid sequences along the genome, the method can reconstruct the distribution of the pairwise coalescence time between two sequences along the genome. And as we will see in the next slide, this quantity is intrinsically related to the effective population size trajectory that you see here. So indeed, if we consider Hasley and Durbin a model of a parmictic population that has population size changes along time, so I note it PSC, We define t as the time before present, so backward, and the unit is, as in all diffusion or coalescence studies, the unit is 2n generations. The effective population size along time, lambda, is just rescaled, so it's the size at time t divided by the size at time 0. And we know from classical coalescence theory that in this case, the probability to observe a coalescence time between two sequences larger than t is given by the formula here. If we rearrange this formula and derive it, we come easily to this one. What you can see is that on the right hand, we have the inverse of the population size that is estimated by PSMC. And on the left-hand side, what we have is actually the probability to have a coalescence at time t, given that we did not have coalescence before. So it's actually the instantaneous coalescence rate. And so this tells us that the lambda function is actually the inverse instantaneous coalescence rate, which I say IICR. Okay, but if we now take a more general model that may include demography, selection of whatever, it also has a distribution of T2 that can be defined by the cumulative density function or by the density function. We can introduce the IICR as before, and we find doing this that actually the cumulative density function has this form, which is exactly the same as that for a population size change model, where the effective size would be the lambda function. So in conclusion, that there always exists a population size change model mimicking perfectly the distribution of T2 observed from two sequences. To illustrate this, we can consider an n-island model, so a symmetrical n-island model with n islands or DIMs connected by the same amount of migration and that all have constant size through time. In this model, we can express the density of T2, and so we can easily compute the IICR. If we do that analytically, we obtain the blue curves. So here on the left panel, it's for two genes sampled in the same DIM, and on the right for two genes sampled in different DIMs. We can do the same by simulating coalescence times using any software like MS, compute the empirical distribution, the associated IICR, and we find the red curves. And most importantly, we can also simulate genomic sequences under the same n-island model, run PSMC on this data, and we obtain the green curves. So the conclusion here is that PSMC infers a spurious population size change, which will be a decline for genes sampled in the same DIM and an increase for genes sampled in different DIMs. And this decline is exactly what we predict using the IICR. So this has several implications. One of these is, of course, that many papers have used the PSMC and have drawn a conclusion about evolutionary histories of species. And many of, if not all of these interpretations may be revisited. So for instance, here what we do is that so in red, this is again the human PSMC, and we show that by proposing an n-island model with constant population size and only 3 changes of migration rate, which are depicted by the arrows, we can get IICR or PSMC profile that are exactly similar to this human PSMC. So it's not to say that this non-stationary island model is more realistic than the model proposed by Lee and Durbin, but at least from the perspective of the T2, it is not less valid. And another thing that we can do is, so given these observations, rather than using PSMC as an interpretation per se of the evolution, we can use the output as a very informative summary statistic, so the full distribution of T2, to accept or reject more general demographic scenarios. So a proof of concept was provided in 2 earlier studies, and recently we pushed the idea a bit further and proposed an inference approach that allows, in the context of a piecewise stationary n-island model, to estimate the parameters of the model, which are the time where we have a change, the migration rates in each epoch, the local dim size in each epoch. And as you can see on the panels on the right, we plot for two examples here the estimated versus true values of some parameters. So the T are for the time where the migration changes. M is the migration in each epoch. So you can see the fit here is very well, is very good. It is of course a bit lower if we increase the complexity of the model and introduce more changes. So to summarize this this part, keep in mind that the IRCR is just a reformulation of the T2 distribution. The two quantities are really equivalent, but it's more convenient in practice to work with the IRCR for several reasons. First, it has a direct interpretation under permixia and neutrality. So in this case, it is the effectively the effective population size trajectory. It is also the quantity inferred by PSMC, which is advantageous in practice. And also it improves the visual comparison of different scenarios that might appear very similar, just plotting the density function. And our research aims at describing the expected patterns of the IRCR in different evolutionary scenarios. This is what I will do with selection today, and also to use the IRCR for demographic inference. Okay, so now I will describe the IRCR properties in models mimicking the effect of linked selection. And to start, I will consider a permictic model with several classes of NE along the genome. So we have K classes. The proportion of each class is denoted AI. Class I is assumed to evolve under the Wright-Fisher model with lambda I n diploids for some arbitrary reference size n. So lambda I reflects the impact of linked selection on genetic drift. We know, so if n is sufficiently large, we know that the coalescence time of two genes from class I follow an exponential distribution with parameter 1 over lambda I. From this, we can deduce that the genome-wide distribution of T2 accounting for all classes is a weighted sum with here AI reflecting the proportion of each class, and here this part reflecting the density function of the exponential in class I. And by the simple definition provided before, this expression follows for the IRCR. So considering this expression, we can already make three conclusions concerning the effect of linked selection on the IRCR. First, we see that the IRCR, the derivative of the IRCR is always positive. So backward in time, this quantity is increasing. The interpretation is that forward in time, linked selection will lead to the inference of spurious population size decline. We can also find that the value of the IRCR at time 0 is the harmonic mean of the population sizes lambda I weighted by their proportion. And finally, when t gets to infinity, so in very ancient past, we also know that the IRCR will converge towards the higher lambda value, so the higher population size, whatever, and this is important, whatever the quantity of this class in the genome, even if it is very minor. To illustrate this, we can first consider a model with two classes. By convention, we will always consider here that neutrality corresponds to lambda equal to 1. And we also here can model background selection or selective sweeps with a value of lambda lower than 1, for instance, and very arbitrarily 0.1 here. What we plot here are the IRCRs for this model and for different values of the proportion of the selective and neutral class. On the red curve shows the case where we have no selection at all, so A2 is equal to 0. In this case, of course, we have no selection at all is the curve on the top. Sorry, the purple one. and it results, of course, in an RSER constant equal to 1. On the opposite, if all the genome is under selection, we have a constant population size equal to the 0.1. And in between, for all other values, we see forward in time a decrease from this value of 1 towards a value that is lower and lower when the proportion of selection increases. For instance, here, for 10% of the genome under selection, we see already a quite marked difference compared to the neutral case. But you can also see that whatever the proportion of selection, this difference with neutrality will always be related to the present past. So t lower than 1 means in real time t lower than 2n generations. We can do the same with two classes, but changing the values. So now we have neutral with 1, and we have a size of 10 for balancing selection. In fact, you can see that this curve, this figure is just rescaling. It's exactly similar to the other curve with a rescaling of both times and the RSER, which are multiplied by 10. But the interpretation is quite different, because now neutrality is here, so on the bottom, and full balancing selection everywhere would be on the top, and in between, if we have, for instance, 10% of balancing selection, this is the green curve. As you can see, even with this small proportion, the difference with neutrality is very significant, because the curve has to go to the highest value of 10 at some point. And also, you can see that these changes compared to neutrality now occur more in the intermediate to ancient past. But there can be also changes in the recent past, but this only arise for very high values of A2, which would be quite unrealistic, probably. And to put these two forces into perspective, we can now consider a model with 3 classes, one for neutrality, so class 2, one with background selection or sweeps, and another, the class 3, with balancing selection. On the left panel, we fixed the proportion of balancing selection to 0.01, so 1%. And we make vary the proportion of background selection and sweeps. As you can see, varying this quantity only affects the recent past again. And on the right panel, we can do the same by fixing the proportion of balancing of background selection and sweeps to 50% and varying the proportion of balancing selection, in which case the variation is essentially on the ancient past. We can also see that for the same proportion of selection, the effect is much stronger for balancing selection. Indeed, if we take here the red curve is the curve without any background selection or sweeps, and it's almost impossible to distinguish from the yellow one with 1% of such regions. But in the other panel, 1% of balancing selection leads to the blue curve, which is already quite different from the red curve without balancing selection. We can also see that merging now several classes, more than 2 classes, can generate some more complex patterns. For instance, if the proportion of selection, so A1 and A3, is not too high, we may see an intermediate plateau, for instance, here, corresponding to the neutral class. Okay, so these examples were quite useful to understand general properties, but now we would like to see what we can observe with more realistic distributions. So to do that, we first consider the study by Gossman and colleagues, who, as I said earlier in this talk, estimated the distribution of any for several species. What they did is they just assumed a log normal distribution for any along the genome, and estimated the parameters of this log normal using polymorphism data from the focal species and divergence data, and this for several loci. The result for humans is provided by the distribution here, and the resulting RICR is plotted here. So to obtain this RICR, we actually discretized the distribution into 25 classes of lambda from 0 to 5, the proportion of each class being determined by the value of the density. As you can see, the main effect here of the RICR is a long-term six-fold decline from t equal to 10. So, of course, because here the highest possible value of lambda is 5, the plateau of the RICR would also be 5, but this plateau would be very long to reach. So we stopped the time at 10, which is a more realistic value of what can be observed with real PSMC, for instance. We can do the same for the parameters obtained by these authors for Drosophila melanogaster, and actually the distribution is very similar, and so is the RICR. And a third option is for Drosophila melanogaster. We considered now another study by Eliashiv and colleagues. So here the approach was quite different, because the aim of the authors was mainly to estimate the distribution fitness effects of new mutations, including both negative and positive selection. And to do that, they also used polymorphism and divergence data, but in addition, they considered local recombination maps and detailed annotation in order to quantify the effect of linked selection in every sliding window over the genome. And actually, a byproduct of this analysis was to provide among these sliding windows a distribution of effective population size, which is plotted here on the left. So here there are some differences with the curves before. One of them is that the support is smaller, so essentially the highest possible value is 3. Another is that we see a mode here close to 0, which is related to the regions with very low combination. Given this bimodal feature, we see a small inflection on the curve here, but it is very slight, and generally the pattern is not too different from what we had in the previous examples. Okay, but now one important question is, what is the effect of population structure also? Because we knew from previous studies that population structure may also generate similar declining patterns, and we saw that for the N-island models. So now we will have at the same time population structure and linked selection. To do that, mathematically, it's quite direct to do. So remember that earlier we wrote the density like this, where this part came from the exponential distribution that follows from the constant size hypothesis. We can generally replace this by any form of density that would arise from a more complex models. And the distribution and the definition of the RICR again just follows from that. So we again, for its analytical tractability, we considered here the N-island model to example this situation, and so we consider that class I now evolves under an island model with n DIMs of dim size lambda I n. Okay, so instead of being reflected by the whole population size, linked selection is now reflected by the dim size. But importantly, really the model apart from that is the same. So we have n DIMs, whatever the class, and also the scaled migration weight, capital M, is the same for all classes, reflecting the fact that migration is not affected by linked selection. For this island model, we already have analytical expressions for the density of T2 and for the RICR. For instance, so within a class, for instance, we know that at present, the RICR for one class is the local dim size, and the asymptotic value for large T is also known. It is generally, the expression is in general a bit complex, but there are simplifications. For instance, for a large number of islands, it is just the meta population size plus terms inversely proportional to the migration rate. And the genome-wide RICR accounting now for all classes can again be deduced from the densities Fi within each class. So to illustrate this, we consider a model with 10 islands and as before, 2 classes of any 0.1 and 1. In this first slide, the migration rate is very high. And in this situation, we expect the island model to be very close to a panmictic model with the population size equal to the meta population size here. And this is indeed what we observe, except in this part of the curve that is in very recent time that still reflects the behavior within local DIMS. Sorry, here the rest of the curve is almost identical to the figure I showed you before with the panmictic case. Okay, but more interesting features arise when we now look at smaller migration rates. For instance, here m equal to 0.5. For comparison, I kept the panel with m equal to 50 that I showed you before. And there are several observations to do here. The first one is, of course, that when we have low migration, the plateau of all the RICR increases, but this has nothing to do with linked selection. This is just the result of population structure. And it is also true for the purple curve on the top, which has no selection at all. Another observation more interesting in this context is if we compare for the 2 panels, the curve with, say, 50% of the genome under selection. Here on the right, you can see that the difference with the neutral curve is very clear. But when you go here on the left, this difference is very hard to do with neutrality. So we may conclude from that actually structure may mask the effect of linked selection. And we can also see some more counterintuitive and complex patterns. For instance, here, the red curve is the one where there is no selection at all. Where there is only selection. So all the genome is under selection. But actually, in this part of the time, this results in the higher effective population size, or in the higher ICR. So this outlines, as we already did in previous studies with different models, this outlines the fact that interpreting these ICR curves as effective population sizes can be quite misleading. And to finish, I consider now an island model with still with 10 islands and different classes of any, but with non-stationary migration. And we have 4 epochs of migration, and this model is actually the one that I introduced before because it mimics the PSMC of human populations. Again, on the top of this island model, so I insist here that, again, the migration history, there are changes over time, but these changes are the same for all parts of the genome. But on the top of that, we have different local dim size with 3 classes, 0.1, 1, and 3. Again, on the left, we fix the proportion of balancing selection. On the right, we fix the proportion of background selection and sweeps. What we can see is that here, in top of the demographic history, we can see that if we have a large proportion of background selection or sweep, so here 80%, we do see a quite strong difference with the neutral, the totally neutral curve, which is depicted in black. And on the other hand, we also observed the same thing here with background selection, but so in the ancient past and for much smaller proportions, even 1%. And to finish, we do here the same, but instead of taking the toy distribution for lambda, we used the one inferred for humans from Grossman and colleagues. As you can see, the conclusion would be here that linked selection is quite difficult to see, except for the part concerning the ancient past, where we have this strong increase related to balancing selection. Okay, so to conclude, the main messages here are that under panmixia, linked selection leaves a signature of population decline from the largest genomic NE to the harmonic mean of the NE distribution. The expected magnitude of this decline is about 3-5-fold for humans and Drosophila melanogaster. background selection and sweep impact the recent past, ICR, while balancing selection impact the ancient past. The effect of balancing selection are much larger for the same proportions. And we also saw that linked selection may partly be masked by population structure. So now one intriguing question is that actually many, if not most, of the studies who focused on the expected signature of linked selection on demographic inference concluded to a population expansion, spurious population expansions, which is the opposite as what we saw. These predictions were based on several sorts of evidence. There were theoretical predictions focusing on single loci with or without recombination. There were analyses of real data that were simulated, including linked selection and inferred with either ABC and the site frequency spectrum or even PSMC. And there were some analyses of real data, either accounting or not accounting for background selection that led to quite diverging conclusions. So how can we reconcile this with our result? One first important thing to note is that the decline signature that we see really comes from the variability of any along the genome. And this cannot be accounted for if one considers single locus model. And it could be accounted for by all genome simulations, but it turns out that the recent study who did that had a simulation model where there was a very regular and short-scale alternance of neutral and selected loci, so that effectively there was no heterogeneity in any. So all the bins had more or less the same effective size. So this can explain one part. And the second thing is, of course, that the variable any hypothesis that we use here is not always appropriate. And in particular, it is known that it does not really well capture the properties of the site frequency spectrum, which under balancing selection is expected to produce an excess of singletons compared to a neutral model with just reduced effective size. So in summary, there's of course a limitation of this ICR approach, and by the fact that it's limited to the validity of the variable any approximation. So for the study of heterozygosity and pairwise coalescence, this is fine. It may be also fine in the case of strong purifying selection, but if these conditions are met, this also has strong advantages. So it provides very flexible modeling where we can include background selection and selective sweep, but also population structure, which I showed. We can include demographic changes, and I did not show you, but we can also include transient or fluctuating selection, and we obtain analytical results. So this can be obtained very fast, and this allows to explore a very large number of possible scenarios. And we could think as a perspective that the observation of ICR curves may allow to jointly infer some parameters of the demography and some general parameters concerning linked selection, as the proportion of sites under selection, for instance. So with that, I would like to acknowledge all the members of the IRCR group. I'm afraid I cannot cite all of them individually due to the time, but they all did at some point or another very nice contributions to this field of research. I take the opportunity to say that we will have a PhD funding starting in September on these topics. So maybe not exactly on link selection, but at least on demographic inference using the ICR or allele frequency spectrum. It will be supervised by Lounès Chiki and Olivier Mazet in Toulouse, so you can contact them at these emails. And I take one final minute to speak about one new project starting in the new lab, so CBJP, with Mathieu Gauthier, Nicolas Rode, Arnaud Estoup. It's about the genomic. So we would like to work on the genomic prediction of the adaptive potential of a population in a new environment. The general idea is that if we observe populations and their allele frequency in diverse environments, we can know which allele frequency are the best adapted to each environment, and use this to predict based on the genome, the fitness in another environment. So this was done with some success by Bay et al. To predict the vulnerability to climate change. And we would like to work on this, but maybe also on a different application related to the risk of biological invasion. So predicting this risk based on genomic data. And we have nice data for that on Drosophila suzuki and Harmonia axirilis, so 2 invasive species. We would like to work on the development and the comparison of prediction methods. And so we also have a PhD funding starting in September. So applications are welcome. And with that, I would like to thank you all. And I hope I fit more or less the time. And I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yes, that's a very good timing, perfect timing. We already have quite a few questions from people outside of Montpellier, a lot. Maybe I'll start with Miguel Navasquez. We are going to try to open your microphone. You should be able to talk, Miguel. Do you want to ask your question?
Hello. Yes, so I was, my question was about, if I understood correctly, this modeling assumes that the rescaling of the effective population size is constant through time. So the regions under selection will have this lambda that this affects all the times, but selection sometimes, I mean, if we're thinking on a selective sweep, the reduction of the effective population size will be during the sweep, not before or after. I was wondering if we can simulate, if we can model lambda that changes through time or something like this.
Yeah, that's perfectly right. And actually, the thing is that all this literature about the variability of any along the genome, it does not really focus on one particular selective sweep. So the idea is that you have in some regions, due to their functional constraints, you have a recurrent input of selective sweep or background selection. So this is why there's no, in this way of thinking, there's no real reason to model changes with time, because it's a recurrent effect. Now, that said, we can also use the method to model one particular selective sweep. This is something I could not present here due to time constraint, but it also provides quite interesting result. And as you say, the idea here is to model that if we have one selective sweep, the effective size is reduced during the period of the selective sweep, and we can fit the magnitude of the reduction based on theoretical results concerning the strength of selection and the reduction of heterozygosity in selective sweeps. And if we do that, we can quite accurately mimic the results that were obtained by in particular Schrieder and colleagues in a paper in 2016, where they applied PSMC to data generated according to a selective sweep. So essentially, the effect that we see and that they see is a local reduction of any, so like a bottleneck effect. The only difference is that in their simulations, they observe, after the bottleneck, they observe a recovery and actually suggesting even an increase of population size in the present past, so above the level that was before the sweep. And we do not see that. We see just a recovery to the normal size. So we still need to think about this to understand if this reflects some artifactual behavior of PSMC, which also occurs with real data, especially in the recent past, or if it's really related to something more deep that we cannot model correctly in leak selection by just changing any.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Then we have two related questions about the signal of decline. So maybe first Guillaume Achaz and then Sergio Gonzalez can ask their questions.
Okay,
Guillaume?
thank you, Simon, for the very interesting, stimulating talk. So I wonder if I understood correctly. This analysis suggests that there is a bias toward a decline in the demographic inferences, like using similar techniques like PSMC. So the question is it really what is observed in real data? I mean, I had the kind of feeling that we usually see growth instead of decline. So any comment on this?
This is what I was mentioning at the end. Many studies did find growth. That's true, and there are several reasons for that. So as I explained, one is that, for instance, if you work with, for instance, with organisms that do not recombine, there's no reason to find the result that we observe, because there's no variability in any along their genome. So that's one first point, and I think in this case there are good reasons to find expansions, because apart from what I said, there are signatures in the associated to linked selection that can mimic a population expansion. So this is also normal. So typically you have you often have these star-shaped genealogies. Mm-hmm. But in the second point is that to observe these features of these star-shaped genealogies, you need to consider large samples, at least not large, but more than 2 sequences. So if you do that with PSMC, there's no reason to detect an expansion due to this different shape. Okay, and the thing is that I don't think that many studies on real data use the PSMC in this context. So you have I cited some papers that use the SFS, and with this I can understand that you tend to find whether an expansion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll carry on the decline signal of decline with Sergio.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think my question was also very similar to Guillaume's. But yeah, then I think that my question would also be if there is any way to compare with other, for example, like a sample of the population using ABC simulations, to see if you could retrieve a comparable decline signal, to try to see if you could correct the one that you get from PSMC-like methods, or is that not a viable way to try to fix it?
Okay, I'm not sure to fully understand the question, but if we talk about how can we correct the biases, of course, one obvious way is to model linked selection and demography together. So this was done, as I briefly mentioned in the introduction, two studies that did that. For instance, there was this study from Sheehan et al. Using deep learning. So they had a simple demographic model with only one population size change, but they considered several classes. They estimated this history while classifying at the same time each region of the genome as being under a hard sweep or balancing selection or neutral. And more recently, there was also this ABC study by Shourie and colleagues. It was more focused on background selection, but the conclusion was similar. Was that if you try to simulate, or if you analyze the data for instance, a constant size population, but with linked selection that you don't account for linked selection, you may you may detect the wrong population size. I think it was an increase because this relates to the question before. They use statistics as the site frequency spectrum, which is not exactly the same as we did. But when they accounted for selection using, I think they had 4 classes of deleterious. There are 4 classes of selection effects from very deleterious to effectively neutral, and when they fit both together, then in this case they really unbias their results, and they do not find any wrong expansion. So I'm not sure if this fully answers what you were saying. There were maybe many aspects in your question, but at least this is a way of doing in practice. What I was suggesting is that we could also we could try to do the same, including among others the ICR summary statistics. So what we can see in our examples is that both population structure, for instance, and linked selection influence generally the pattern of the ICR. These effects can be sometimes confounded, but they can also be to some extent separated. So fitting an ICR curves, having in mind to play on both selection and demographic parameters may provide good answers, but this is I mean, this is very speculative at this point. We did not try at all. So
okay, yeah, thank you, Simon. That was yeah, that was the point I was trying to make. If you could use also demographic inference to try to unbias the result. And thank you, really cool.
Okay, now maybe a question more focused on selection from Matthew Hartfield. Matthew, you should be able to. Oops, no.
All right. Hi, Simon. Thank you very much for that talk. So I just noticed as well that Maxine Bomholmer asked a very similar question, so I should acknowledge her in this as well. So yeah, I just think in the opposite direction, really. So it seems like you're focusing on accounting for selection to improve demographic inference, but, and maybe the previous question also asked this as well, but if you were to think about it the other way, so if you were to look for outliers in these lambda values for, say, very low values or very high values, these could potentially be used to find individual sites subject to selection, or even say, for example, like regions of admixture, those that have a very high heterozygosity and therefore presumably a high lambda value. Would that be possible? And is that the point of this model or not?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The thing is that our approach here is more based on looking at what and how local patterns can affect the genome-wide distribution of the coalescence time. So it is not really as it is done currently. It's not really suited to detect local changes of the lambda function. You know, it's more like what happens if we have several lambda that merge together. What's the overall result? So we could possibly try to. I mean that's a bit a different story from what we did, but one could of course try to with real data to estimate any in different windows along the genome, either using PSMC or another approach, and use that to classify loci as more or less under selection. But I'm I'm not sure. I think there are probably most efficient methods to do that. Although I understand that your point is how to avoid the confusion effect from demography, right? So
Yeah, I suppose what came to mind is when you showed the Drosophila data, the Eliashib data. And so it occurred to me, or even something like humans, where it's been generally inferred that there's kind of like bottlenecks and expansions. And so I was thinking if one could account for the baseline demography somehow, which I think is what you touched on at the end. And then you can look for outliers relating to that.
yeah, no, we need to think about it. I cannot give you a definitive answer, but
Okay.
yeah, I understand that probably working on local RICR would allow to account for demography and at the same time maybe detect potential changes in lambda.
Mm-hmm.
That's maybe a good point. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, we have a few more questions from Laurent Escoffier. Back to demography. Laurent, you should be able to talk.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Simon, for the very nice talk. I was just wondering about one point that you mentioned about the signal that you see of a recent decline in case of background selection. So I think it has been shown analytically by Michael Deasy and his team that actually with background selection, you could have a bit more complex signal where you would have an overall long-term lower effective size for the population. But recently there is, it's as if you have a bit longer external branches than you would expect as in the normal coalescence, so which would give some signal of recent population growth. And somehow that's a bit what we see when we simulate selection with background selection and then try to infer sync with PSMC or MSMC. We see this kind of recent signal of population expansion. So why don't you see this, and what could be the reason for the opposite conclusion that you have?
Yeah, I think that relates to the to what I was answering to Guillaume. So it's totally true that the underlinked selection, one of the it cannot be reduced to a change in NE, and one of the main points you see is also a modification of the shape of the genealogy. And this shape looks more similar to the shape of an expanding population. So if you use, if you're going to use methods based on the site frequency spectrum, for instance, what we say does not really apply. So I think it's normal in this with this kind of approaches to find a population expansion. Now the question is if you apply PSMC, and so I mentioned this this recent study that you did with Jory. My feeling, but it's only an hypothesis, because I see that effectively with PSMC there are also a signal. There's also a signal of sometimes of population expansion by applying PSMC to data simulated under linked selection. So this is actually so this particular observation is the strongest contradiction with what I say here, because it's really exactly the same method, the same model. So my interpretation, it still needs to be checked for sure by maybe more simulations, but more tests. Is that in the simulations in the paper of Jory, there's no heterogeneity in effective population size. It is a bit like if linked selection was the same everywhere in the genome. It's not the same everywhere because there are introns and exons and intergenic, but the succession of these regions is very fast and very regular everywhere. So if you would go to this, that would be something to test very easily. But if you would go to this, you take this simulated data, you take a given sliding window over in the genome, unless it is very small, probably the estimated effective population size would be the same everywhere in any window in the genome. My feeling is this does not reflect the heterogeneity of population size that observed over studies. And this can fully explain our results, because in our results, if we have no heterogeneity in population size, we have no decline. These are the curves I showed where we have only one class. Of course, the ICR is constant. There's no signal. The signal comes from the heterogeneity.
Okay, no, thanks.
Okay, maybe we'll take one final question by Jérémy Rio.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so thank you, Simon. I was just wondering to understand maybe better the ICR. Could we consider it as a continuous version of the PSMC, which looks more like a discrete?
Yeah, that's one part of the difference, because the ICR is indeed continuous and the PSMC is in practice discretized. That's not the only difference. Maybe the more fundamental difference, you can see it as the ICR is so, as I said, it's a mathematical transformation of the density of coalescence time. So it is a kind of a theoretical quantity associated to a given distribution or to a given evolutionary model, while the PSMC is an estimation. So in an ideal situation, you could say that PSMC estimates the ICR. And actually, that's I say in an ideal situation. There are some artifacts with PSMC, but overall, it estimates the ICR extremely well. The problem is not that. So the problem comes in the interpretation that you do about this estimation. So the estimation in itself is very good and is remarkable to be able to do that from real data. Now, our point is to say that what PSMC estimates, this is the ICR, and it has, in general, no reason to be a history of effective population size. It is just a distribution of coalescence time, and the same distribution could arise from very different models.
And how much can we relate the ICR to ghost populations? Could we think there is any link?
There's a link, yes, because for instance, if as we show in the N-island model that I showed at the beginning, you could say that having structure is not an issue, provided you sorry, I don't know how to state that. You could say yes, there is structure in my data, but I know it. I did some preliminary clustering or PCA or whatever, so I know there is structure. If I take data from one single DIM, maybe this should not be an issue. I know that I took my samples in a unit that is itself panmictic.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you do that, the PSMC of this sample that you took within a DIM is affected by the fact that this DIM is in contact or has been in contact in the long past with other DIMs.
Yes.
So
So
it's related to ghost population because these are past relationship with other DIMs that you either don't know or just don't account, which make which affect the general pattern of the ICR.
so could this be in some way I mean, what would you say could be the most effective parameters that play a role that makes this kind of bias between the expected effective population size and the IICR that you get? I mean, there is difference between what we expect and what we observe, and what would it be to you, the reason?
So the interpretation of PSMC as a change in population size is only valid if the population is panmictic and has always been panmictic forever and neutral, as we saw today. So any other thing in the history of the population that departs from panmixia and neutrality will have an effect on the ICR and will lead to, so if you interpret it as a population size change, will lead to inferring wrong population size changes. So that there are many examples of scenarios with constant meta population size or constant population size where you see changes in the ICR.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon, for this very rich discussion. Sorry, there was 2 more questions, but I'm afraid we are running out of time now. Maxime, I hope you got some answer to your question during the discussion with Matthew. I'll just have a few announcements. First of all, we are going to have this year a Louis Thaler conference that will take place the 2nd of July. And it will be Anna Coco who will give a talk, and also we'll take time to have sessions of discussions with students. We need to organize this, even if we cannot do this in person. So we will see if it's possible to do it or if we are gonna have to use Zoom. But in any case, we encourage the students to prepare something and to have a chat with Anna. Last, just a reminder about the call for end of May and June. There's still a few slots available, so you can still propose a speaker until I think the end of the weekend. So just a few more days to propose someone. Okay, I think that's all. And with this, we have another talk next week at the usual time, 11:30. So thank you very much, Simon, for this very interesting talk and discussion. And good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.